Yeah. Because when you watch someone who you know and love, go through what he's going through.
Possible that there isn't anything funnier than a guy in a dress.
It might be too tall, might be too short, might be too dark, might be too light. They may decide they want to go Hispanic or they want to go woman.
It all started with what seemed like harmless jokes. Katt Williams would talk about Hollywood actors wearing dresses. On the surface, it sounded like just another comedy bit. But when you looked closer, he wasn't joking. He was hinting at something deeper, something darker. Williams challenged the audience to rethink what they saw. Look at it from a different way, he'd say, and when you do, a pattern emerges. Every time a black man in Hollywood reaches a certain level of success, something changes. The roles shift. Suddenly, he's offered parts that require humiliation, not celebration. Like wearing a dress on screen, it's never random. Williams posed a question: show me one person that ever wore a dress in Hollywood unsuccessfully. It wasn't about comedy anymore. It was about conditioning. Maybe the actor was too tall, too short, too dark, or too light. Maybe they reminded the casting director of someone they didn't like. Maybe they didn't fit the look. And suddenly, it wasn't about talent. It was about compliance. This is where the story of Malcolm-Jamal Warner begins to echo. Watching someone you respect struggle under this system is heartbreaking. And for those who have been paying attention, Katt Williams had been sounding the alarm for years. He warned about the hidden price of being black and successful in Hollywood. His interviews, dismissed by many as rants, weren't unhinged. They were encoded warnings, not about fashion or fame, but about survival. About the invisible walls around black excellence, Katt made it clear Hollywood doesn't just build stars, it breaks them when they stop playing along. He didn't name names lightly, but the pattern was always there. Careers being sabotaged, reputations being dismantled, public trust being manipulated. Behind the laughter was pain, behind the jokes was truth. Williams wasn't alone in noticing this cycle. Malcolm-Jamal Warner had seen it too. Only his warnings came more subtle through reflections, quiet statements, and emotional interviews that didn't draw as much attention until now. Williams pointed to the same revolving door of struggle. The same trap the system uses you, then discards you when you outgrow its control. He even highlighted how Kevin Hart, another beloved black comedian, found himself targeted next, not because of any wrongdoing, but because it was his turn. That phrase struck hard. His turn, as if there's a list and every black star will eventually be crossed off. And then, Williams did something few dared. He talked about the Illuminati, not in abstract terms, but directly. He warned others to be cautious, to think twice before chasing power that came with a leash. He said, "It's not necessary to stir up that hornet's nest unless we intend to get stung 1,000,000 times." He wasn't exaggerating. He spoke from experience. He had, by his own account, been stung countless times. The backlash, the censorship, the headlines painting him as unstable. They weren't accidents, they were punishment. I didn't understand that they had to sting me 1,000,000 times. I'm still not going to join, but I respected them. He admitted. Williams wasn't trying to play victim. He was offering a confession, a roadmap, a warning. He wasn't the only one facing this. Malcolm knew it too. Both men had witnessed the cost of truth in an industry built on illusion. Williams drew parallels between his own journey and the tragic fates of black leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Jesus, and even members of his own family. People who spoke too loudly, people who became threats. The industry doesn't just cancel careers. It erases legacies, and in that erasure, the real story, the one with power, is buried. Katt admitted that his own outspokenness brought trouble. His honesty became a weapon used against him. The louder he got, the harder the system hit back. And yet, he kept speaking, not for fame, but for clarity, for truth. He stood firm. Doesn't mean I always make the right decisions, but I am gonna stand by what I stand for. One of the most chilling revelations was about Bernie Mac. Williams claimed to know the real reason behind Bernie's decline, and hinted that powerful people profited from it. They hated Bernie, he said, not because of his jokes, but because he wouldn't conform. Then came the Oscar moment, the infamous slap. Williams claimed it was staged, that it was part of the industry's larger game, that it wasn't an accident. It was orchestration, and if anyone would know, it was Katt. He'd been in the production world long enough to recognize the signs. The industry is canceling one black guy. He said, "I know what happens when they're going to elevate another, and I know what happens when they don't care about either." To the outside world, it may have looked like Will Smith had a breakdown, but Katt wasn't buying it. Not when Will's entire career, spanning decades worth tens of millions of dollars per film, was on the line. There are 300 corporations that are a part of the Will Smith business operation, he revealed. That kind of infrastructure doesn't allow for random meltdowns, not without reason, not without purpose. Williams argued that what we witnessed wasn't chaos, it was choreography. A calculated play by an elite machine that knows how to manipulate perception. Hollywood, Katt insisted, has an agenda, one that targets black men, one that rewards silence and punishes truth. And when you step out of line, they don't just ruin your image, they erase your existence. Malcolm-Jamal Warner felt that too. His career was built on quiet strength, on dignity, but as he began to speak more openly, the system responded with silence. That silence, Katt believes, is no accident. It's a strategy. Others saw it too. Terrence Howard, Denzel Washington. Both refused to play along with Hollywood's stereotypes. Both rejected roles that would reduce them to caricatures. They stood for integrity, for authenticity, for representation that wasn't rooted in exploitation. And now, with fresh footage surfacing, fans are realizing what many missed. Malcolm-Jamal Warner wasn't just a sitcom star. He was a messenger. He had been trying to tell us all along, and maybe we weren't listening, until it was too late. For the longest time, Malcolm-Jamal Warner was the safe face of black success in Hollywood. He had grown up in front of the camera, portraying the lovable, grounded Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show. Week after week, he brought warmth and relatability to millions of households. To fans, he wasn't just a character, he was family. That image followed him into adulthood, dependable scandal, free and far removed from controversy. But that very safety became a double-edged sword. Over time, Warner began to realize that his invisibility wasn't protection, it was marginalization. His voice, once celebrated, had been gradually muted. In his later years, he began to break the silence, not through sensational headlines, but with reflective, thoughtful words about his experience. He talked about systems, about who gets to tell stories, and more importantly, who gets erased from them. He raised questions that made people uncomfortable, and in hindsight, he was sounding the same alarm Katt Williams had been shouting for years, just in a quieter tone. In the final episode of his podcast Not All Hood, released merely 2 days before his passing, Warner delivered what now reads like a parting message. He didn't offer a lighthearted sign-off. Instead, he spoke honestly. He recounted a recent conversation with a spoken-word artist named Tama Georgemi Harper. When he mentioned the name of his podcast, she instantly replied, "Ain't nothing wrong with the hood." That single statement made Malcolm pause. It shook something inside him. It made him reconsider how black life had been portrayed and reduced in the media. The podcast title, Not All Hood, wasn't a rejection of where he came from. It was a critique of how narrow and one-dimensional the portrayal of black culture had become. Malcolm wasn't distancing himself from the hood. He was trying to highlight its richness, its beauty, and its history. In his own words, he declared that the hood has always been the foundation of American culture. That wasn't just an opinion, it was a historical truth, and it was one Hollywood had worked hard to bury. In one of his last interviews, Malcolm said something that now feels like a prophecy. Black survival in America. That's black excellence, not wealth. Not awards, just staying alive. With dignity, with strength, with purpose. That, he argued, was the real struggle. He wasn't talking about surviving the streets. he was talking about surviving systems. The same machine that raised him now seemed to be turning its back on him, or worse, erasing him altogether. Warner emphasized that the Black community is not a monolith. It cannot be contained within stereotypes. He wanted to create a space where different voices, different stories, and different truths could be heard. He was tired of the narrative being hijacked. He was done with the silence, and then he was gone. Just 48 hours after that powerful, soul-bearing podcast episode, Malcolm-Jamal Warner died. There was no grand Hollywood tribute, no wall-to-wall media coverage, just quiet, almost too quiet. It was as if the industry wanted to skip past it, hoping no one would connect the dots between his final message and the larger truths he had dared to speak. What's haunting is that this wasn't the first time Warner tried to shine a light on deeper issues. Throughout his life, he had remained graceful despite carrying heavy burdens, personal, professional, and cultural. He didn't spiral like other child stars. He didn't seek attention through controversy. He kept building, kept reflecting, kept evolving. Even during the height of the Bill Cosby scandal, Warner stood at a complicated crossroads. He wasn't just a co-star. He had been chosen by Cosby when he was just 13 years old. Cosby mentored him, shaped his work ethic, and even advised him on how to avoid dating the show by staying away from trendy slang. Warner took that advice to heart. Years later, when he rewatched episodes with his own daughter, he saw that the show still held up. That, to him, was proof of Cosby's influence, not just on the show, but on his life. So when more than 50 women came forward accusing Cosby of sexual assault, Warner's world shifted. He couldn't ignore the pain of the victims, but he also couldn't erase what Cosby meant to him. In a 2015 interview, he said, "He's one of my mentors. Just as it's painful to hear any woman talk about sexual assault, whether true or not, it's just as painful to watch my friend and mentor go through this." His voice trembled with emotional conflict. He wasn't defending Cosby, nor was he condemning him. He was simply being honest about the complexity of the situation. Warner refused to turn his back on Cosby, but he didn't blindly support him either. "I can't defend him, but I won't throw him under the bus," he said. That position brought criticism, but it also reflected emotional maturity. He challenged the media's framing of the case as a circus and questioned why all accusations were being painted with the same brush. He didn't want to excuse Cosby. He just wanted room for nuance, for thoughtful discussion. The fallout from the scandal didn't just affect Warner emotionally. It hit him financially and culturally. When the show was pulled from syndication, Warner expressed deep sadness. "We've always had the Cosby Show to hold up against negative images," he explained, "and now the fact that we no longer have that, that's what saddens me the most." To him, the erasure of the Cosby Show wasn't just a personal loss. It was a blow to representation. A blow to generations of Black families who had seen their realities reflected in a more hopeful light. He also spoke about the double standard in the entertainment industry. While work by filmmakers like Woody Allen and Roman Polanski remained widely available, the Cosby Show was scrubbed clean. Warner called it out plainly. "It's literally taking money out of my pocket." This wasn't just a cultural issue, it was personal. It affected his livelihood, his identity, and his sense of fairness. Over time, Malcolm's perspective shifted. He moved from frustration to reflection. One conversation that deeply impacted him came from his former co-star Keshia Knight Pulliam, who played Ruddy on The Cosby Show. She reminded him that no matter what had happened, the show had inspired thousands of young Black kids to go to college and dream bigger. That reminder helped him reframe the legacy of the show. It wasn't just about the scandal, it was about what had already been accomplished. That shift showed Malcolm's capacity to grow, even under emotional pressure. Despite all this, Malcolm-Jamal Warner managed to stay grounded. Unlike many child stars, he didn't fall prey to fame. He avoided addiction, legal trouble, and tabloid drama. He credited his mother, Pamela, for that. She managed his career and taught him discipline from the start. Even as a teenager, Warner was writing books to help other kids avoid the pitfalls of fame. In 1988, he published Theo and Me, Growing Up OK, a guide for young fans about making smart life choices. Warner never sought pity. He didn't exploit his fame, he used it. He expanded into directing, into music, and into spoken word poetry. He even won a Grammy for Best Traditional R&B Performance and earned a nomination for Best Spoken Word Poetry Album. His career wasn't just long, it was meaningful. He played serious roles in shows like The Resident, Suits, Major Crimes, and American Crime Story. He stepped out of Theo's shadow and into his full self. He avoided the traps, he stayed intentional, he stayed kind, and still, the silence around his death was deafening. Even with all his personal strength and artistic evolution, Malcolm-Jamal Warner was not untouched by tragedy. Beneath his calm demeanor and thoughtful interviews was a man who had suffered profound personal loss. One of the deepest wounds came from the passing of Michelle Thomas, his former girlfriend and co-star who played Justine, Theo's love interest, on The Cosby Show. Though they had broken up in the year 1994, their bond remained unshaken. When Michelle was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of stomach cancer in the year 1997, Malcolm stayed by her side. She passed away in December of the year 1998, at just 30 years old. It was said that Warner was with her during her final moments. It was a private heartbreak, one he didn't speak about much, but it left a visible mark on him. That kind of pain reshapes a person. It deepens their silence, it sharpens their sense of what matters, and perhaps it was this heartbreak, and others like it, that made Warner's perspective so clear and grounded in his later years. His voice, always calm, was never detached. You could feel the weight of what he had lived through in the way he chose his words. And isn't that exactly what Katt Williams has been warning us about for years? That the moment a black entertainer steps out of line, lifts the veil, refuses to follow the rules, the machine starts to move against them. It doesn't scream, it doesn't argue, it silences, it erases. Williams said it plainly in interview after interview, that you can climb only so far before someone reminds you whose game this is. He wasn't being paranoid, he was naming a pattern, a method, a system. And Malcolm, he had started to notice it too. He didn't shout about it. He didn't go viral for his complaints, but in his interviews, in his podcast, in his work, he began to thread the same warnings into his message. And then, just like that, he was gone. There was no media frenzy, no tribute from the industry that had once embraced him as a symbol of safe, relatable black youth. There was no moment of collective reflection. Just a quiet exit, so quiet, in fact, that many didn't realize it had even happened. It felt intentional, the kind of silence that isn't accidental, but strategic. A silence that exists not because people forgot, but because someone wanted us to. Because once you start connecting the dots between what Katt was shouting and what Malcolm was whispering, a chilling picture starts to form, one that makes it clear someone didn't want us paying attention. And now, with newly surfaced footage of Katt's recent interviews, people are beginning to wake up. This isn't gossip. This isn't a Hollywood scandal to be consumed and forgotten. This is a long-standing structure, one that exploits black men for their talent, their charm, their narrative, and then turns on them the moment they stop being useful. Katt Williams has always been the loud one, the unpredictable one, the voice too raw to be controlled, and because of that, the system dismissed him, labeled him unstable, unreliable, dangerous, but Malcolm-Jamal Warner was the opposite. He was consistent. Grounded, reliable, he was the one they never expected to resist, but when he did, even subtly, it mattered. He began to speak out about who controls the stories, about what stories get told and which ones don't, about how black voices, when they try to step outside the narrative designed for them, are either punished or ignored. And Warner, who had once been celebrated as the face of a positive black family image, found himself increasingly sidelined when he began to speak deeper truth. It wasn't just about race, it was about power, who has it, who loses it, and what happens when someone dares to question its rules. Looking back now, many moments feel less like reflections and more like confessions. Warner wasn't trying to go out with a bang, he wasn't building a scandal, he was leaving behind breadcrumbs, quiet, powerful pieces of a larger truth. One that Katt Williams, through his own journey of rejection, rage, and resistance, has been trying to drag into the light. Williams exposed how the industry stages conflict to manipulate public perception. Like the infamous Oscar slap, which he claimed was orchestrated. He didn't believe that Will Smith, one of the most carefully managed stars in the world, had suddenly lost control in front of millions. Not when there are hundreds of corporations tied to his brand. Not when his image is worth tens of millions. Williams argued that it was a move, a message, and more importantly, a distraction. He had seen it before. The way the industry elevates one man while tearing down another. The way it manufactures drama to hide deeper truths. The way it uses black men against each other to keep the machine running. The industry doesn't need loyalty. It needs silence. And when it doesn't get that silence, it makes noise, headlines, scandals, cancellations. Malcolm didn't give them scandal, so instead they gave him silence, and yet his legacy endures, not through tabloid stories or viral clips, but through the body of work he left behind. He didn't just act, he created, he directed, he wrote, he made music. He earned a Grammy for Best Traditional R&B Performance. He was nominated for spoken word. He tackled subjects like mass incarceration, deportation, and racism in his short films. He refused to be boxed in, refused to be defined by one character, one show, or one mistake. His early success on The Cosby Show could have been his peak, but Warner never let that happen. He understood the dangers of nostalgia. That's why, for a time, he even disliked being called Theo. Not because he hated the character, but because he didn't want to be frozen in time. He wanted to grow, and he did. He directed episodes of Kenan and Kel. He appeared in shows like Suits, The Resident, Major Crimes, and American Crime Story. He created poetry, music, stories. He explored different parts of himself, both creatively and spiritually, and all of it pointed to a man who was choosing evolution over ease. Purpose over popularity. Even in his personal life, Warner kept his integrity. His mother, Pamela, had raised him with discipline, taught him to avoid the traps that had consumed so many other young stars. He stayed away from addiction, from crime, from self-destruction, and even as the industry tried to ignore him, he stayed consistent. He published a book in 1988, Theo and Me, Growing Up Okay, where he gave honest advice to young fans. The book wasn't about fame, it was about being responsible, about thinking for yourself. That mindset carried through his entire life. He understood early what others took decades to learn, that the spotlight doesn't protect you. It exposes you, and if you're not careful, it consumes you. In the end, Malcolm-Jamal Warner proved something that no scandal could take away. That you can grow up under fame, carry a legacy that's both glorious and tainted, face personal tragedy, challenge a system, and still walk with dignity. That you can choose truth over survival, and still leave behind something real. Katt Williams and Malcolm-Jamal Warner walked two very different paths, but both arrived at the same painful truth, that the system does not reward resistance. It punishes it, and now we're left piecing together what they tried to say. One with a shout, the other with a whisper. The question is, why are we only listening now, and more importantly, who else tried to warn us before it was too late? That's it for today. Until next time, goodbye.